concept for you. Ever since I
Contains words.
Word, bro. So cool. Okay. All right. And we are live on this internet thing I've heard so much about. Let's see. And
Can they hear us? Can they see us? Hi.
yeah, they can hear us. See us as a testing of work in progress. Hold on. What is? Oh, come on. Be a good little computer. Come on, don't do this. It's gonna do it, isn't it?
I don't know what it's doing.
Not very much of anything, that's what. Okay, so we got audio on the feed, but for whatever the reason, the video. Oh, there it is! Yay! We have an
What was
image. It was user error. I'm
No,
the
I'm
user.
talking to him, not you.
Oh, okay, sorry.
The bowl is under the chair.
Okay. So, folks. Okay. All right. So, folks, we've got some interesting things for you today, assuming we can get kind of. Yeah,
I don't even know.
I turned your audio off. I'll turn it back on because it's cooperating now.
Okay.
Well, okay. And it's, well, okay. This is going very smooth. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
Best one so far.
really, you think so? That's great. All right.
Absolutely.
viewer discretion is advised.
Okay, hold on. So let me see here. Okay. Let's try this here real quick. Okay. Okay. All right. I think we have something that works. Fingers crossed. Let's see. All right. Here, let me. I got my camera off while I was trying to fix something. I'll put that back so people know what the heck's going on. Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're having I want to say minor technical difficulties, but I think that's so deductible. They are. Also, you were muted, so no one heard half of that, and then I quickly turned your mic on.
That's okay. It's probably a good thing.
Yeah. All right. But anyway, we're gonna start in about, if you're ready, in about maybe a minute. The dumpster fire.
I've been ready. I've been ready.
Yeah, the dumpster fire is almost under control. That is this show, and that's probably about as good as we're gonna get. All right. So, folks, if I do this, can you see? Yes, you can. Great. All right. Okay. So, folks, let's get the party started. Okay. So, Joe, just stand by. And let's get the party started. All right, we're recording. Here we go. All right. Are you ready for this, Joe? Well, that's good. Nobody else believes me. Okay. We got a whole one viewer. Hello, one viewer. Thanks for putting up with the extreme delay. All right. Oh, we got another viewer. All right. So here we go. Everybody, the legendary Joe Collins is right here. We're about to start the show in just a second. So here, everybody just stand by. We're going to fade to black. And here we go. We're going to be talking about Linux text editors. What could go wrong? All right. Well, okay, there we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Open Source Tonight, episode 19. How y'all doing today? I've got Joe Collins with me. How you doing, Joe?
I'm okay. Been waiting a while.
Joe's referring to our extremely fun technical difficulties that are on display for today's high-quality episode of the show. We're going to be talking...
Are you sure we should call them technical difficulties, or is it more appropriate to say extreme operator error?
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. You know, everything was working fine, and then we start the show, and it's like, nope. We have to have glitches, unfortunately. But you know, fingers crossed. Today's episode's going to work just perfectly. Okay, that's the plan.
Perfectly.
Yeah. So let's hop into it. So this is a text editor chat. So we're going to talk about Nano. We'll start with that. What's your thoughts on Nano?
Well, let's take a moment before we jump into talking about Nano. And for those who are tuned into this or wondering why it would be a topic at all, maybe it would be a good idea to explain exactly why text editors are so important to Linux.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah, so I mean, the whole idea with this text editor stuff that we're talking about here is you can go in and edit things like config files. Linux is such a config file heavy operating system that you're going to realistically be editing a config file probably at some point to do what you need. And you also might want to actually edit just a standard text document. And we're going to be mainly talking about, from what I gather, CLI text editors today. So the command line, you know, stuff you do in a terminal. But we might touch on the GUI flavor, you know, the desktop flavor as well.
Oh yeah, we have to talk a little bit about that. But Linux and Unix itself originally was conceived as being a plain text operating system. And that everything, as far as Unix is concerned, and Linux, since it's a Unix work-alike, everything is a file. And so you can do some really interesting things with plain text editors. Now, when you say plain text, this is an editor that, unlike LibreOffice or something like Microsoft Word, something you'd be used to, this works with plain ASCII text that is stored in very simple files with no fonts, no font sizes. There's none of that. We're just dealing with the plain text that you can use to write scripts and programs and all configuration files and everything like that. So in a Linux world, if you're going to be getting into the side where you're going to be doing a lot of scripting, writing configuration files, and writing any sort of software, your text editor is extremely important to you.
Well said. And I mean, again, you're talking about very important stuff. I've wrote bash scripts at the CLI with things like Nano and such, and edited config files with it. You know, you really can get into it. So if we actually look at our old friend Nano on the screen here, this is it right here. And you can see it's easy to open. You just type Nano. That's all you got to do. And
if you feed it a file name that exists, it'll open that file for you.
Very true. It will. But if we actually look here at it, so we can, you know, very easily do stuff. So we got our options down here at the bottom of the screen. Okay. And we can come in and we can change different things. We can move to the next page, check spelling, you know, that kind of thing. So, for example, if I wanted to say write something, right now, we're not actually giving it a file, so we're just a blank box. So we could just do like test. Well, if I can type. Right. So I could type test, right? And right. And then once we type test, I can just go Control O, and it says cancel, and I got to do Control X and yes, and now it's going to ask me for a file name. So I can just say, let's say /temp for the temp directory, and then we'll just call the file test. And now, if I go back and I specify /temp/test after Nano, it opens it right back up. And you can even specify multiple files at the same time when you do that. How groovy.
Very groovy indeed. keep talking for a moment. I have to let the cat out.
Very well. So, folks, Joe's going to go let the cat out. But anyway, so you can do a bunch of different things here. You can control the justification of it, which is like the centering of it. So that's something that we can do. And as you can see there, I went ahead and did the shortcut. And it says justified paragraph. So these are things that you can do, right? And now I can just type gibberish here. And as you can see, it types. So the Nano text editor is pretty powerful because you can really get into really editing stuff on Linux in the CLI, but it's not going to be a pain in the rear. Joe, tell me what you think about Nano. I'm sure the audience wants to know.
I like Nano. Nano is a good go-to editor. It does a lot of things that I like. For instance, if you load a bash script or any other type of script that it recognizes as being code, then it will colorize the code, making it easier to see individual commands. So if you open up, it should be set like that to default. Sometimes it's not. It's an option that you can turn on depending on your distribution. It's one of the things I do really like about it. It's very lightweight, and just for making quick edits, it's a great little editor for opening up configuration files and adding lines and things like that if you want to see the whole file. So yes, a big fan of Nano. I use it all the time.
Yeah, and as am I. So, we're very much fans of Nano here. And if we go back to Nano here on the screen, you can see, like I said, we have that document. So, you've got different keys. Like I can do Control X, and then if I haven't saved it, which in this case it says you've modified the buffer, we can just hit Y for yes and hit enter. And now I've saved my update to that, which was just some more gibberish. And so that's easy enough to do. You can really get into this, and we can also specify multiple files. So, for example, I could go in here. Let's say I wanted to modify the Nginx config file because I got that on this box. I can add that as my second one, and then I can use Control X to go from one file to the next. You can see here, very handy little feature that I can do that. And then, of course, I can use Control X to get all the way out.
Yeah, you can have two files open in Nano and switch back and forth. You can also copy back and forth and do all kinds of neat things that way. Very powerful.
Very well said. Yeah, you can do some pretty powerful stuff. So, Nano at the most fundamental level is pretty simple. I mean, again, the fact it's got the guide at the bottom of the screen here, it's pretty self-explanatory. So the up arrow caret, normally that means control. That was something that I had to figure out, but once you do that, like again, Control X to exit, you can do Control W to write your changes without exiting. I'm a big fan of saving every 30 seconds when I edit anything, so you'll see me if I'm using it go Control W like crazy because I'm terrified that I'm going to forget to save. So I just
write it out. Yeah,
exactly. So we can look at
there's some other editors. I guess we need to talk a little bit about good old VI.
Yep.
There are people who have been into the Unix and Linux world for a very long time who have used an ancient editor called VI. And today you can't really get real VI. What you get is Vim, VIM, which is VI improved. And if you are a VI type person and you can use it and you like it, I say knock yourself out. But for VI is not intuitive, and that is my biggest problem with it. I haven't spent enough time in it to be able to get where I can navigate it with it easily. So I'm not totally knocking it. I understand why some people really like it, but Vince and I are not VI guys. It's just no. And I know some other people. We're not alone, by the way. I mean, if you talk about like Martin Wimpress, who maintains Ubuntu Mate and has his channel Wimpy's World, you ought to go check that out. He is also a Nano type editor, and he uses Nano all the time in the terminal. Now, if I'm not in the terminal, then I will use GEdit with GNOME. There's a couple of plugins that I really like where you can change the text size and that sort of thing. and I really like Cobalt. Is the name of the color scheme that I like for that. That's also available in Linux Mint in their text editor, and I'm having a brain block as to what the name of that editor is off the top of my head. The one from Linux Mint, but it's the one in Linux Mint is based on the one they use in Mate, which now I can't remember the name of either. Should have came prepared to class, shouldn't I?
Yes, prepared to class, everybody. Joe Collins.
Yeah,
was
I
not
don't know.
prepared.
I mean, do you have an extra screen? You can ask what is the editor in Mate, the default GUI editor in the Mate desktop?
Yeah, let me Google it. I know what you're talking about, but offhand, I'm not sure.
Hey, no, kitty, bad kitty.
Let's see here. Mate desktop text editor. So let's see here. What is it? Because I know exactly what you're talking about, but I can't remember. It's called Pluma. Pluma, everybody.
That's right, Pluma. Thank you, Pluma. And the one that's in Linux Mint, which is it's XEd, I believe, because they're all the
XEd sounds right.
It's
yeah,
XEd. I love XEd. They kind of take Pluma and add some more things to it. So I use that one an awful lot. My main system is running Linux Mint right now, and that's one of my favorite applications in there is the text editor in Linux Mint. So, I mean, if you're running text, sometimes it's really nice to have these things, like where you can highlight a line. I find it very useful. And by the way, you can do this in Nano as well. I don't know if you knew this exists. You can have the lines numbered.
Yep, I'm aware of that, and I sometimes will do that if I get like an error where it says, line number 300X or whatever.
Right, and you need to know what line you're on, and that is you can write an alias for Nano that will switch on certain things, and I think Ubuntu does use an alias to turn the colors on. Not really sure about that. I know somebody does it, but you can add to that all kinds of
the
things.
Colors, so I mean they're in something, aren't they?
You can have your standard Nano, or you can have Nano with, you can number the lines. There's several options like that. So I like to have the lines numbered because when you debug something, when you try and run it or parse it or whatever, especially scripts, it'll say there's an error on or about line 80. So it's nice to know where line 80 is,
Oh yeah. Yeah, very much so. I mean, you want to know where it is, and so everyone knows you can do. If I actually go over back to the terminal, I was storing VI here, but let me get out of it real quick, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can do Nano, and then you can do the Nano command with -L, and that will give you line number. So if I was to say, we'll just open the Nginx config file again because I'm just picking on Nginx today. I've been working on Nginx a lot today. Can y'all tell? Probably not. It just happens that
it's in your head, so there you must have been doing something with it. Go on.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anything in this config file I don't mind showing in the air. We'll find out the hard way.
Not Nginx. I doubt very seriously there'd be anything bad.
I've been setting up the config file to do like live streaming and stuff, so which is a video I've been teasing, so y'all get ready for that. But anyway, we can look at the side here, and you can see, sure enough, there's line numbers there. And if I was to say go back and remove that -L, look at that. No line numbers whatsoever. Right. So, again, that is something that, you will or will not have.
Most text editors, especially the graphic user interface type, you can set all that stuff up. You can basically build an environment so that when they open, like for instance, you can have a spell checker on if you want. It'll underline what it doesn't recognize. You can do a lot of things with it. I find that to be a useful tool. But what we ought to do is take it down to the real basics here, because I asked you this question before we started doing this when we were working through technical difficulties. So I had asked Vince, I said, what would you do if you were on a Linux system that was so basic that there was no editor at all? How would you actually edit a file? And his answer was?
It was use the cat command.
Right. So if you can put the terminal up on the screen, because people always freak out. Okay, so you type and I'll tell you what to do. How's that?
All right, go ahead.
I can't see what you're doing, but I'm just, you already know what we're doing, so it doesn't matter. So anyway, if you want to follow along, if you have a Linux system standing by or whatever, you can open up a terminal, and then you can type in this command, cat, and the right pointing arrow, which informs the cat command to take its output and put it into a file.
Yep.
And we can call the file test, T-E-S-T.
Yep.
And then you hit enter.
Yep.
And you can type in whatever you want. So Vince, type in something like, this is line 1.
Okay, got
now
it.
Return. This is line 2. Okay. Hit enter again. And now when you're done creating your file, you can sit there and you could type your lines in. All you have to do is hit Control D.
Got it.
And
Simple
you should be
enough.
back at a prompt. So if you ls test, it should pop right up.
All right, and so if we take a look, I just catted the file. You can see here, what do you know, everybody? The lines.
Now, go ahead and exit that and go back to the prompt. Or you're already at the prompt. This is a dangerous trick, but you can do it. Every now and again, you will come across something somewhere that tells you to add a line to the end of a config file. And for whatever reason, you're looking up how to do something or whatever. So you're trying to figure this out. I'm sorry, guys. I've been looking over here. I should be looking at you. Anyway, it'll tell you to do that. And you don't have to open up a text editor of any kind. You don't have to scroll down through the file to get to the bottom. All you have to do is do cat 2 arrows and add the name of our file text. Now hit enter. And now type in, I added this line. And then Control D. And then use the cat command once again to type that out, and you'll see that you've added your line at the bottom.
Simple enough.
Right. But it's dead dangerous, because if you do that to something like a config file, something in the etc category, a configuration file, and you accidentally just put 1 arrow in there, it will rewrite whatever's in there and completely destroy the file. So a good rule of thumb before you edit any existing file is to back it up. Create another copy by saying, let's say you're editing fstab, for instance, which is the where your partitions are mounted at boot up. Before you do that, create a file called fstab old, make a copy of that, and then you can play around with it. That way you have some way back. The other thing about using cat is that once you hit return on a line, you can't go back up and edit it. When you hit return, you have put that in the buffer in memory, and you can't go back up to it. So, yes, it'll make a quick and dirty file, but you better be really sure about what you're looking at on the screen before you save it. And remember that you can't go back up and edit it. You can only do that in a real editor that allows you to jump up lines and skip words and things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good advice to always back up your system config and such. And take it from somebody that used to be like, I don't need to do that. I'm just gonna just edit the file, right here. I can handle it. Trust me, you will make a mistake and you will break your Linux system. I've done it. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but we all mess up our system when we're learning, and boy, did I do that plenty. I messed up a bunch of systems.
It's a lovely feeling when it boots up and it ain't there.
I don't know if
It's
I'd
not
say
running at all,
lovely, but you can call it that, I guess. It's something.
Ask me how I know about being real slick with the cat thing and adding a line to the end, and getting that syntax just 1 character off and ending up blowing out the file. done it more than once, boys and girls. And so it's like, all I can say is, man, you better just back everything up.
Yeah, and I don't normally edit config files with the cat command that Joe was talking about. I've used that occasionally, but I haven't really used it to edit config files. It's just like to make like some test file or something, it's like a scratch file.
Well, it's very useful if you're working for like config files like host name. There is every Linux system has a config file in etc /etc etc, etc, whatever you want to call that directory, called host name. You want to know what's in host name? The name of your computer. That's it. Yep. If you go in and change that, if you go in and change host name, guess what? You've changed the name of your computer. You don't have to do anything else to it.
Exactly. And shameless plug
so
here.
It's real simple.
Yeah.
One line.
Yeah. Shameless plug here, by the way. I did a YouTube video like 6-7 months ago, something like that, on changing your host name in Linux. And Joe's right. It's as simple as just editing that config file. And I don't remember. I think you have to either restart that network service, like Network Manager or something like that, or reboot the computer. I always just reboot when I change it. But regardless,
you can do it, or just restart, and it'll broadcast a different host name.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
There's another file in there. It's I can't remember the name of it. It's hosts, HOSTS.
Your host file. Yep.
And if you do that, you can go in there and you can basically write a map to, how we were talking about the last time we were talking about SSH having to know all the static IP addresses. Well, if you don't want to type in the IP addresses for the computers on your network, you can create this hosts file, which has the name of the computer and the IP address, so that all you have to do is type in the name of the computer and it will automatically figure that out. It doesn't have to go out on the network and try and figure that out. And a lot of home type routers these days do not have host name servers running anymore.
Yep, that's a known issue.
That used to be a thing. Not anymore. They don't bother, and there's no way to do it. So it's something you could look at. I got around that by writing a little stub where I just have to put in the last 2 digits of the IP address of the machine I'm trying to get on the network. So it interprets that for me. So it fills in the 192.168.0 part. So I just put in, like when I do it, I type in SSH in, and let's say it's machine 14 on the network, 14 is the last, boom, done. But yeah, there's all kinds of ways that you can configure and customize. And that's why I tell people, especially the ones who are, they're always like, I don't really want to learn how to do this. I want to just point and click my way through Linux. Well, the problem is with that is that you miss out on an awful lot of cool stuff you can do,
Oh, definitely. I mean, the terminal we're talking about some really cool stuff, just being able to do that. And I mean, again, that host file, it's an etc/hosts. That file right there, I've edited that before because, again, like Joe was saying, you can go in there and you can set the name of systems. And as a web developer, sometimes I will want to have a local hosted web server that overrides, say, vincentmagger.com that's on the internet, so I can have something local, but just type in vincentmagger.com for some reason. This is the kind of thing you can be very useful because this works on web browsers. This works on basically anything that's looking up a name, right? Your host, and it's the same in Mac and Windows as well, is there's a file in the system that overrides your DNS at the network level. So this can be very useful. Another thing, too, that I've seen people do with that is if there's a site they want to block on the computer, is route it to an IP that doesn't have a web server on it at all. And you can do that.
That's how the Mint Nanny worked. You remember that? There was years ago, Linux Mint had a little piece of software that came with it. It was a tiny little thing, and it was called the Mint Nanny. And essentially what you could do is list web pages that you didn't want people to get to on that machine. And that's exactly how it did it. It just edited the host files and made them into basically where it couldn't find it. And that like you said, it overrides DNS on the network. So it just goes straight to it. And that kind of half worked because, like, if you're trying to block YouTube, for instance, there are several different URLs that'll get you to YouTube. It's not just youtube.com. So there's ways to get around that. And so you'd have to block every possible URL that points to that. A lot of the big websites have many different DNS identities that point to the same web address. But then again, I think there's a way to block the web address as well, isn't there? You can just tell it, don't go here.
Yeah, I mean, so from a security standpoint, you can really lock this stuff down. If I was doing it, I would say don't do it at that Linux system level. I would do it at a network level, have an internal DNS server for the network, and then route all the computers to that. And then the other thing you need to worry about too is you need to have it so they can only go to that DNS server, right? Because if you get a technical user that knows what's going on or figures it out, they can just say, I'm going to change it to Google DNS on my laptop, and then the filtering doesn't work. So that's something for you business owners or schools or whatever you could do. And there's tools like Pi-hole, for example, that you can do DNS overrides on and lock things down like that. And it doesn't automatically have to be for blocking either. I mean, there's different use cases like we were getting into. Maybe we'll do an episode about DNS at some point. But getting back to text editors. So if we look over here, one text editor that I find very interesting is GEdit. So if we actually look at GEdit, this one is an interesting one. Hold on just a second while I change here. So this is GEdit. And we've got code highlighting in this too, by the way. So for example, let's say I wanted to do Python 3. There it is. So we can go, if I type import, that will highlight. There it is. And actually, I believe this is the theme you like too, isn't it? It's like Cobalt, I think, is the default
Cobalt,
theme.
yes.
Yeah.
By the way,
but yeah, this is what we can do. I mean, we can do the code highlighting. We can do that. We can, do everything really. Now, another thing that I really like is VS Code, which you're talking about real complex stuff with VS Code. But I really like it. You're talking about something that's more complicated, but one thing I like that it does that GEdit doesn't do for us programmers out there is it will do code completion. So if I was starting to type a library that it knows is on my system, it will actually say, hey, you want this? And you can just hit enter and you'll auto complete it. So little things like that start to add up, when you can auto complete things.
I find auto completion to be a double-edged sword sometimes though, because sometimes it gets you tend to rely on it, and sometimes it doesn't work. So I've always been a little afraid to turn that on,
I mean, for me, I've become very reliant on it. So obviously I'm a little more comfortable with it,
to each his own. It's like whatever tool works best for you. You just go ahead and knock yourself out, and you do that. I think there's a plug-in for GEdit that will do that for Bash as well. But I'm not really sure. Been a long time since I dug deep into that. Because what ends up happening is you set this up the way you like it, and then that's the way you use it.
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, this is a very personal thing for code editing and such that, you do it your own way. And there is plugins for GEdit from what I'm aware. And, there's all kinds of things you can do. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure there's going to be code completion plugins for something like Nano probably too. I don't know of one offhand, but it wouldn't surprise me. But, again, you can get pretty complicated with this kind of stuff. I do see a lot of programmers using VS Code, and I mean, I like it, but I will admit it uses a lot of RAM, and it's an interesting. Plus, it's from Microsoft, and I know not everybody necessarily cares for Microsoft stuff as well.
Speaking of Microsoft, I wanted to mention this, throw this out there since we're doing this topic. Anybody who's watching this video, if you've been around for a while, you may remember that there was a text editor for DOS. And it was available, I know, in the late 90s and right around 2000. And it was called PerfectRight. And I think that it was absolutely one of the best executed text editors ever. And this thing had really slick spelling correction in it. It also had a database for mail that was part of it. And it was so easy to use. Back in the days, I used to use it for, a text editor can be used to write code and to edit configure files, but it can also just be used to write just plain text. I end up doing a lot of writing in text editors because I find them to be more, I'm more comfortable with it than I am, let's say, opening up LibreOffice and starting a document and then having to fool around with file size and indentations and all that other kind of stuff. A lot of times I start out writing in plain text and then I will migrate over to that if it's going to be a document that it's going to be more fancy than that. But anyway, this thing was called PerfectRight, and I believe it was open source. It has never been ported over to Linux. I've never been able to find it. But if somebody knows what I'm talking about and wants to work on that, I would be willing to help them with that project to get that ported over, because that was the best one ever. It was interesting in that you would there was no save function in that program. The way it worked is that you would specify a file name, and if you did, it automatically created the file, and you just typed. And every time you hit a key, it would write it. So everything you did was written. So if the machine blew up, guess what? You were talking earlier on about having to hit save all the time. This thing did it. And when you were done, you just exited the program and your file was wherever you left it.
So it did autosave? Is that what you're getting to?
Yes. Yes, but it was pure plain text. It was gorgeous. And it had, like I said, it had a dictionary in it. It would highlight words that were misspelled. And you could go and get suggestions and everything. Best text editor I've ever used. Haven't seen it probably since 2005 was the last time that I actually used it.
I'd never even heard of it. So, it's definitely before my time. Yeah.
Yep.
I'd never heard of that one, but, I'll have to Google it after the show and check it out.
If somebody knows, like I said, if that's available in GitHub or somewhere, we need to get that packaged up and make it available, because that is an awesome program. There's another one for Linux that I can't remember the name of. Brian Lunduke likes it an awful lot, and it's kind of along those lines. It's more of a text editor that you can write in a terminal with. It's not as basic as something like Nano, and it's got all that in. And I don't particularly like the way that one works, but I can't remember the name of it now, so I'm pointless and useless. So if anybody in the chat knows what I'm talking about, it's a program that you can, and it will export in all kinds of different file types. So you can open up like for instance, an ODT file. You can open this in this terminal-based text editor. Now you can't see the formatting, but you can look at the text. You can type it and then save it, and it'll work. Can't remember the name of that one either.
Yeah,
totally useless.
I don't know what that one is either, but that's interesting.
So if anybody in the chat knows,
yeah,
what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that there's a command line one that supports ODT files, because I didn't know.
Yes.
Yeah, that there was any that did that. And for those that don't know what we're talking about the open document files. That's what LibreOffice, for example, saves by default, from what I'm aware. And so, but it's an open standard. Well, this thing will
open up all kinds of file types. God, I wish I could remember the name of it. But no, I'm not a big fan. The reason why I don't know what it is because I looked at it and I tried it and I went, I don't like that. Didn't like the layout. Didn't like the way it looked on the screen. It didn't. There's another one too. There's another text editor out there that I don't know if you've ever played with, but it comes with. There's a file manager that you can put in your terminal called Midnight Commander.
I have played with it specifically because I seen you make a YouTube video about it. And I'm like, okay,
yes,
I gotta check it out.
And when you install that, it installs its own little text editor as a bonus. And that's a pretty cool little editor. I haven't really played around with it too much, but it comes with Midnight Commander. That's all I know.
I didn't even know a text editor came with Midnight Commander, so that's news to me right there. And so I got to tell you, full disclosure, I never really cared much for Midnight Commander. I know a lot of people like it, and you like it, and that's all.
I
good
like
and all.
it because I use it for search and destroy, to be able to go find a directory or a file on a computer and and usually to kill it, usually to try and delete things, clean things out, because you can move through the file system so quickly with that thing. Once you get used to it, you can just really go through it. Now, when you start manipulating files, like copying things and whatever, it gets a little bit more strange. But just for like seek and destroy and go and find or copy and move something, I use it all the time because it's just quick and dirty. Especially doing on a server SSH. Instead of having to, constantly list things and try and figure out where they are, you just go in that, and that gives you a way to go through it very quickly. It's very useful that way.
I got you. So it's something you use organizationally to kind of trim the fat from the file system.
Yeah, or just, like you need to go see if this configuration file is on this machine. Bam, you can scroll through those files so fast. The boom, 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 you're there. And then once you get on it, you can hit F8, and F8 will delete whatever it is. It'll even confirm, do you really want to get rid of this? Yes, goodbye. Gone. I like that.
I got you. So we should
there are people that, you can take and I'm pretty sure that Nautilus will do it. I know that Linux Mint's file manager will do it. That will hook up directly with SSH, SSHFS, and it'll go across, and you can work on another machine, and it's like you're there, and it's in that. It's a little bit more complicated. I find it just more useful to log in to a terminal, fire off MC, find what I need, get out of MC, and I'm done, than it is to try and plug Nemo, which is the file manager in Linux Mint, or, you could be using Kaha or whatever is on your machine, and, whatever. And usually they have that, but I find that to be a little bit more cumbersome than just going in and using MC.
I got you. That's an interesting perspective on it. So let me ask you, what is, in your mind, if somebody starts out with Linux, I'm assuming you would say Nano is the first command line text editor you would advise them to go to?
Yes. The only drawback that I see to Nano is, by default, it does not word wrap. So if you open up your text, you open up your terminal, and let's say that you have 80 characters going across, it will not automatically take that line and move it down to the next. You'll get a $sign, which indicates that the text goes off in that, goes on. And I find that to be very, it's to be somewhat hard to deal with myself. Is that, matter of fact, when I write scripts, I make sure that I don't write a line that's more than 80 characters long. And even if I do, I actually write them in such a way that you can see it on an 80 character screen. You can put you can take the character, the backslash, and that will accept the next character, or escape it rather. And so I can do that and hit enter and then keep continuing. Well, when the line actually executes, it just sees it as one line, because it is such a pain with Nano to have those lines go off the screen that way, or at least I find it to be a pain.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I do the same thing where if the script's big enough, I will put that backwards / forward / whatever it is.
Right. In other words, and that's one of the nice things that what was I talking about? Xed and GEdit will do, and so will Pluma, is that you can go in and say, okay, I want you to show me where 80 characters is, so that when you're getting close to it, and it'll change the color of the background to let you know that you're typing out into, because plain text doesn't have any rules. You can have a text file that's one line that's 10,000 characters long. It doesn't care. If it doesn't see that carrier return, or what you get when you do the return key, it won't. And like, for instance, a lot of Windows text files, if you open them up in a Linux text editor, you will notice that what you thought was a paragraph is actually one really long line, because that's the way a lot of it's stored, the Windows text format.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing about text editing is, you've got /R, which is a character return, and /N, which is a new line. And Linux and Unix systems like to use /N to denote a new line and just that. But Windows, it's /R/N. And Mac, I forget what Mac is. They had /N, but it's like they have their own thing I think they also like to do. I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll have files that go between the two. So that's why I like to be very careful about, like in my scripts and whatnot, if I have text in there, I actually format the text to be 80 lines across so that there's even if you looked at it, in other words, you're not counting on a word wrap ever. In other words, it's what you see is what you get. And it's the easiest way to do it with programming, although it's a bit of a pain when you're actually writing it. Now, Nano does have a great feature in there called Justify, where you can set that to, say, 80 characters, and it will take care of that for you. And it will add the carriage returns down the side to make sure they're there, or the new lines. That's something you might want to play with if that kind of bothers you.
Oh, okay.
But by default, it's not there.
I got you. I hadn't heard of that. What I will tell you when it comes to Windows is the built-in notepad on Windows 10 and up, the latest version to Windows 10 and up, it actually supports Linux and Unix new line characters, so /N, and it will interpret them. So, but from what I understand by default, it still does /R/N, and it's interesting because there's actually a program in Linux, I forget what it's called. Right now, it's a CLI one that will actually, you give it a text file with the /R/Ns, and it will take /R/Ns and just make them /N.
Yes, you can convert it. It's been there a long, long time. I know I don't remember the name of it, but I do know the program.
It's like DOS to Unix, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, it's like DOS to Unix, exactly. And you feed the file name to it, and then it spits out a file where it goes through and changes that over. Very useful program. I have had to use that, but it's been years and years ago. It's been a very long time. I do know the program. And I think that's POSIX. I think that's in the system. I don't think it's something that you need to add.
Yeah, it's in the system as far as I know by default. I know that actually, there were some Unix installs that used to ship those. I played with, I think, what was it, like HP Unix or something like that a while back. And
HPUX.
Yeah, HPUX. Yeah, but anyway, whatever it was, it shipped with the DOS to Unix installed already on it. Because I was curious about that, and I went and checked, and sure enough, it already had it. So, that's something you can definitely do. But Joe, we're getting kind of to the end of the show here pretty soon. So is there any kind of closing thoughts you want to leave here for the last maybe 15 minutes or whatever of the show?
See if we have any questions. Did anybody ask any questions?
No, let's take a look at the questions. Everybody just stand by.
Nobody asked a question. They don't care. No.
I got a question here. Have you tried Emacs?
Yes.
Yeah, Joe says that he has. I have also tried it. Full disclosure, I don't care for it.
Emacs is so powerful and so overblown that there used to be, I used to say that Emacs stood for Emacs makes a computer slow. But it is, it's like an entire environment within Emacs. There is so much going on. I can't imagine anybody on the planet that actually uses all of it. But I went through a period of time where I tried to learn how to use it, and it just, like I said, I can appreciate it, but it was too much. I was like, I don't need all this. I will never use all of this. Emacs will it'll check your mail. It'll you can have a mail client built in. No, it's honestly, there's a mail client built into Emacs. It'll do all kinds of stuff. And if you were just somebody who lived on a terminal all the time and you needed to have that kind of power, I could see it, but been a long time since I played with it. Probably about 10 years since I looked at Emacs.
I got you. Yeah,
I don't knock it because I think it's like whatever works for you and whatever's great. I don't think it's I'm not one of these people that's like if you use Emacs or VI, you have a problem or whatever. It's like whatever works best for you, knock yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, again, the power of open source is the fact that the tool for you doesn't have to be the tool for me. We're not stuck into stuff like that. I mean, I don't understand why somebody would want to use Emacs or VI, to be honest, but if that works for you, then that works for you. And, I'm going to sit here and continue to use Nano and VS Code and occasionally GEdit. That's what I use, is those three. But, again,
I'll tell you another one that's good is Kate. As a text editor, I'm not a KDE fan. I don't ordinarily run the environment, but I have used it. And there are some things about that are more logical than what you get in GEdit or edX or Pluma. It's like, the KDE people just have a slightly different way of doing it. And I like that editor as well.
I got you.
So we could start the whole KDE versus everybody else debate. That's
yeah, maybe not, but no, I mean, I know what you're talking about with Kate. I mean, I didn't really care much for Kate. It's all right to me. It's really KDE's version of GEdit, but it's probably a little fancier than GEdit out of the box. That right there is probably going to get me yelled at in the comments. Also, Robbie says hi, Vincent and Joe in the chat. So there you go. Hi.
Anything else?
Let's see. So we do have a comment in here. Leo says, I want to use my text. I'm guessing my text editor is what they meant, to add launchers for app images. I'm not 100% sure how you're going to do that. But there should be a way. I mean, it's probably going to be a .desktop file of some kind. But as far as like the exact specifics with app images, I used to play with those. It's been a long time. I really don't. I don't know, Joe.
Well, an app image is basically a binary. It's a self-contained binary. It's got everything that the program needs to use. So if you learn how to do desktop files and you know where you're storing these things, but let's say you have a place to put them, like in your home directory, you could have an app image. And then all you would have to do is go figure out how to write the desktop launcher, and you could put those in there. But there's an easier way to do that. There's a much easier way to create desktop launchers. And that is, if you're running any non-KDE system, it doesn't matter. It could be GNOME or Cinnamon or any of them. It doesn't matter as long as it is not a KDE system. There's a program called a la carte. And a la carte is a menu editor that works on the free desktop, the whatever, I can't remember what it's called, the x86 desktop. It's the standard that Linux uses.
The free desktop spec, that's what you're referring to as far as I understand.
Yes, thank you. And a la carte makes it super duper unbelievably easy to edit your menus. And it doesn't matter whether you're like on GNOME, where it's not really using a traditional menu. It's all of that structure is still there because it has to be in order to conform to that desktop standard. So if I write a program and I want to install it on your desktop, I have to write to that standard and put it in like a deb file or something. So if you get a la carte, then you can go through and change. You can do some amazing stuff with that thing, and it doesn't ship by default with most Linux distributions. But not anymore, but it is still out there. And that is a very powerful program for creating launchers on your desktop. Excuse me, doing that graphically. Shouldn't drink Spite and be on the, on the mic at the same time, because all I've done this whole show is burp. But anyway, look for that, a la carte. It's really a good program. It's tiny too.
I got you. Speaking of which, by the way, Leo said at the beginning of the show, so I put a thing in the community tab asking what people's favorite text editors was. And Leo said, you asked what my favorite text editor was. I don't really have one. Just one thing I like to have is the line count on the left-hand side of the program, like we were talking about you could do with Nano or something. So, your requirements are pretty loose, and so it makes it pretty easy for you to really run whatever you want pretty much at that point.
I think the biggest requirement for me in a text editor is, and all of them do it, thank goodness, but the biggest requirement is to have that color coding when you're looking. I've gotten addicted to that, and that's probably a bad thing. but I've gotten so addicted to opening up like a bash script, and this, I can just read through that, and my eyes will just go straight into where the commands are, and I know exactly what I'm looking at. So for me, that's kind of important right now, is that you have that color coding, and Nano does that, which is awesome. And if any other editor I'm using, I always set it up.
Yeah, I mean,
and a spell checker.
Yeah, spell check and
I need
color
a spell
coding.
checker.
Yeah. I mean, color coding and spell check's pretty important, because I
can't.
No,
those two things are really important to me. And when you start getting into doing 1,500, 2,000 line scripts, that gets to be a big deal. And another thing is, when you write scripts, please leave lots of white space. It doesn't slow the script down for you to have an empty line. It just skips right past it when it parses. A lot of people write those things, and if you go and look at other people's code, they'll squish them all together. It's like, don't do that. Lots of open space is nice, but that doesn't really have to do with the editor. That just has to do with my old eyes trying to figure out what they're looking at.
I like a lot of white space as well. I have to add some. If I don't, you'll see this when I'm coding. I've done it on the air a few times, and you notice I can't help myself. I instantly just, without even thinking about it anymore, I just like, okay, there's going to be a space here. There's just certain places I always put a new line that's blank, and I have comments a certain way.
Yeah, especially when dealing with ifs. I like a lot of air in ifs, especially nested ifs, because as you go down, that starts to get harder and harder.
Yeah, you need to indent them, right?
Where am I at? I don't understand. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you need to indent them, right? If you don't indent your code, it drives me nuts. I've seen people that they don't do that, and it drives me nuts. But anyway, I think it's probably about time to wrap the show up here.
I don't indent everything. I indent the comments a lot, but I don't indent the code. So you probably wouldn't like me.
No. I mean, the way you write it, I don't have a problem with it. The thing that I want indented is things like if statements and functions internal. Like, no, don't indent like random.
Once you get into something, it should go down logically. So you're going, I'm saying it kind of moves down into it instead of everything starting at one point. You're like, what is that? Yeah, there's a certain, they should have a certain shape.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you know what you're looking at, especially like case statements. You play around with those a lot.
I've done a little bit of them. I generally don't care much for them. I mean, I know
when
they
you
have
do
a point.
When you do a case statement, like you're building a case menu, man, that's got to be right. If you don't, those are hard to keep up with if you don't have it where it's. Anyway.
Definitely, and I mean, I've only really but one script with it, but it's got a ridiculous complicated case menu now. And I mean, yes, definitely if it's not indented, I mean, heck, I have trouble understanding it with it being indented sometimes. That right there tells you how complicated they can get. But, I think that realistically kind of just points out how complicated this stuff is. And, our goal is to try and kind of simplify things for people, but, when
I first started writing scripts, I thought it was really cool to have a menu. And so I would always write menus. And then people said, well, we want it to launch automatically. So then I would put options where you could type in an argument and it would launch automatically. Then I got to the point where I don't bother with that anymore at all. I mean, I want them to run automatically just like by default. But then I got to a place toward the end where I would write menus for the fun of it. And to get the menu, you type the name of the script and the menu option. Then it would go into a menu mode, and it's like I have stuff. It's crazy the stuff that you come up with. But I like to play around with menus. I love the idea of making the terminal more like a desktop application, like you're running it in a terminal emulator. If you can do that kind of programming, it fascinates me.
Yeah, and I mean, you can do some interesting stuff with that. There's a Python library I've used before that will automate being able to build some really like HTOP style GUIs that are complicated and very interesting. And again, it kind of starts to blur the line between, is this a text interface? Is this a GUI?
Exactly. Well, that's where you get to the point where you're asking yourself, do I really need to be writing this in a script? Maybe this would demand a more complex language.
Well, that's why you go and you write it in a Python file, hashtag Python, best programming language. Well, maybe not the best for everything, but I like it.
You got to teach me Python, man. Everybody loves Python.
I mean, it's wonderful. Once you get good at it, you can really write anything. It's very powerful, very flexible, and one of the things I really like about it is, as somebody that needs stuff 90% of the time to be running like instantly, it's very fast for me to write. Oh, we need that in 2 days. I can build you that in 2 days, right? In Python, you do that in something like C. At least I couldn't do it in 2 days. Maybe somebody could that was, like a really advanced C program. I mean, to a certain extent, this kind of stuff's going to depend on what you're used to, and you kind of get used to it. Like, I've wrote Python for the last 3 or 4 years almost every day. You do that enough, something like that, you start to get kind of good at it. But yeah,
so that's why you've gone goofy and walked sideways.
I'm not really
you
sure
do that every day.
What, right? Python code?
Exactly. Check and see if we have another question, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions, so I think it's a good time to wrap it up. But I will tell you this live stream did better during the live show than last week's for the live viewers. So, yeah, we'll have to see what this does in the recording, but I think we might have picked a good topic.
I'd like to see what people have. I'm going to be really interested to see the comments on this. And, if this is something you guys are digging, I mean, whoever's watching right now, tell a friend, subscribe. Let's get the word out, and because the more people participate and the more you contribute and the more questions that you give us, the more we can elaborate on things, and the more interesting this will get. There's not a whole lot of this going on in the Linux world right now. We're here to just talk about nuts and bolts, not about politics, and that's the whole idea behind these podcasts. Is just, what do you want to talk about this week, and keep it simple and keep it practical. So, if you come up with any questions or whatever, send them.
Yeah, I mean, it's very well said. And I mean, again, I've always tried to strive to kind of keep out of the politics of the Linux community and such. And just, I want to talk about the technology. That's what I'm here for. Also, we got some comments. All right. Next topic, Leo's saying, do USB formatted and USB writer. So yeah, we could maybe next week we talk about that. That can get very complicated where you can have all these scripts, like talk about like USB devices and like USB drive writing and stuff like that. That could be, again, it can get a very complicated thing. You can talk about UDEV and have scripts to automatically handle drives, and this is stuff me and Joe has both kind of dealt with a lot, as USB devices on that. So that could be an interesting idea, I think.
I have found that when you're talking about writing USB, there's one command that you need to learn and understand and get to know, and that is DD. The disk destroyer, baby.
I love the DD command. It is like...
The DD command is evil, nasty, horrible, terrible, ancient Unix code, which can easily screw up your entire life or give you a nice, nifty, bootable USB drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you can do some very interesting things if you're careful with it. I've used it to make backup images of like SD cards, and you can do some very complicated stuff. But again, what do you know? It can be pretty powerful. But yeah, it's very old code. So maybe we'll talk about that and like the GD commands and stuff next week, or I don't know if we're going to do one next week, but whenever we do the next one, might be next year. I'm not sure when we're going to do the next show where it's the holidays. I don't know when the scheduling will be. So y'all stay tuned to the community tab and I'll post so y'all know when the next episode will be. So yeah.
All right, cool.
All right, folks. So Joe, tell them where they can find you at online, and let's wrap this puppy up.
All you have to do is go to YouTube and type in the search for Joe Collins Linux, and my channel will pop right up. It's me. And for the next little while, at least, you can find links to all of that stuff at easylinux.com. I have a bash scripts page there where I have lots and lots of software that's listed that you can download and play with. That's Easy Linux, EZEELINUX.com.
Sounds great. You can find me at vincentmaggard.com, Vincent Maggard on YouTube, and obviously here on Open Source Tonight. Yeah, Joe has pointed out there's no point in going there. I already muted you for part of that, and I had to unmute you real quick, so that's how I had to get the context.
Well, he muted me.
Well, I thought we were going to end the show like right there, but anyway.
Well, I mean, I thought I was here to pick on you, man. You got to leave my mic open, or I can't pick on you.
Well, I was gonna close it so I could, go ahead and end the show. But anyway, everybody, thanks for watching Open Source tonight. We'll see you again very soon. If we don't talk to you again in a podcast episode until 2023, Happy New Year and happy holidays from Open Source tonight. Goodbye, everybody! All right, and that covers our show. So goodbye, everybody on the live stream. I'm going to go ahead and end it there, too. Just so everybody knows, as a bit of a programming note, we will have a better quality version of this. My internet's not doing good tonight, so it's very low bit rate and ugly looking, but there will be an uploaded version of this soon. And last week's episode, by the way, another programming note, for some reason, YouTube doesn't like the upload of it. I've tried to upload it like 2 or 3 times now, and it rejects it every time saying can't process. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but we got to troubleshoot that. But thank you all for staying tuned through all the technical difficulties. Really do appreciate it. And yeah, I think that covers everything. So bye.